Welcome to this episode of TheSquare. With the ongoing COVID pandemic, there probably isn't an industry hit harder than aviation. With the vast majority of flights and airlines at a complete standstill, there's a lot of questions about what's going to happen once it is deemed safe to fly. Today we have Scott Gorenc with us, who's the Aviation Studio Design Director, and he's headed up an initiative called Airports Adapt, which is really looking at how airports come to life in a post-COVID world, and the changes that they are going to make from what we've learned from this disease. So, Scott, thank you so much for joining us. Before we even get into the Airports Adapt, you tell me a little bit about why you are in aviation design when there's so many different fields out there.
Sure, thank you, Brandon. So for me, aviation design has become a passion of mine over the past 12 years. Initially, I was really interested in doing sports architecture because of the civic nature of sports facilities. But I got intrigued to get into airports because of how significant they are in a community. Not only do they connect people from place to place, but they become icons for the city. In some locations like Singapore, London Heathrow, and here in Dallas, our airports are as iconic as our cities. So being able to work on those is quite a pleasure to do.
Well, and on top of being iconic, they're a huge piece of the infrastructure with traveling. So certainly, with the huge hit they've taken during the COVID pandemic, it's given kind of some pause both for airports and the people who design airports to think through how this will change things moving forward. Tell me a little bit about Airports Adapt.
Yeah, Airports Adapt looks at how the COVID virus has impacted society and what we can learn from that impact to how we change terminal design. Things like social distancing and staying 6 feet away from each other has now become a standard for how we operate on a day-to-day. Me and my wife go on walks, and if there's someone on our side of the street, we all take turns crossing the street so that we don't have to be close to each other. As we return to normal after COVID is resolved, what's going to happen to how we interact in terminal environments? How do we plan for the amount of space that we provide for passengers? How do passengers interact with each other and employees? So what we've done is we've identified 3 large buckets of information to do a deeper dive into. Social distancing and the impact of space. Touchless processing. How do we go through an airport where we don't have to interact with people or things so that we can keep to ourselves? And 3, wellness. How can we have a built environment that not only keeps our health at the forefront, but also can go the extra mile to actually leave us in a more healthy place?
That first one with social distancing, I think one of the most striking pictures that I saw very early when we were just kind of realizing how big the coronavirus was going to be were shots at the Customs and Border Patrols at different airports in the country that was just, wall to wall to wall people, and people trying to process over the course of 4, 5, 6 hours. How is something like that going to affect design moving forward?
Sure. Well, that's a great example. So, the paradigm in the past, the standard was to take large processing elements such as the security checkpoint and customs and consolidate it for operations, so that the TSA or the CBP only had to operate one checkpoint. But what that meant then is that everyone had to funnel into one singular point, and of course then you get large queues. So in situations like the one we saw when everyone was trying to come back into America after the travel ban, you had queues that were unmanageable. You were clustered with groups where one flight was coming from a hotbed in Europe versus a flight that was coming in from Cancun, and ultimately that results in an environment that isn't safe and isn't the right way to do it. So if we were to evolve from that, can we look at dispersing that operation? so that instead of having one customs process, can we have multiple? And then what's the impact on the queues with that? Can we schedule it better so that we all don't have to wait in line like that? And if we do have to wait, can we disperse the waiting areas across the terminal so that we're not all standing next to each other in that one little area?
Touchless processing seems one of those things that's actually, it seems like there's already a significant amount of progress towards that already. I mean, I know that if I go to the airport to fly somewhere and I don't have to check a bag, I can have my boarding pass on my phone. Really, the only interaction I would have where I'm actually having to hand someone something is to my license to the pre-check person. But certainly if I was going to be checking a bag or if I didn't have pre-check, there's definitely interaction with other people that's happening. So give me some examples of how that is moving forward.
Sure, I think that I agree with you. I think that there's a lot to learn, not only from aviation, but from other industries when it comes to touchless processing. Obviously biometrics play a large role into it, and the Customs Border Patrol is on top of that with things like global entry and TSA PreCheck. Allows you to opt into these services to get you through these things faster. But can we look at other areas like Walt Disney, for example? Disney has the Fast Pass, where it allows people to check in online, and it designates a specific time for them to come to a ride, so that they know they can skip that line, so that and all they have to do is buzz their wristband and they're in. So if we could apply that same philosophy to how we do airports, can you just buzz yourself in, and when you have to be at the checkpoint at X time, you're going to board at X time, and so therefore you don't have to physically interact with agents, with kiosks, with things that potentially hundreds of people have been interacting with before you.
I understand probably touchless processing is really thinking through how people get to the airport, get on a plane, and take off. Has there been any thought about what that looks like for concessions or retail or other aspects of the airport journey?
Yeah, I think so, and I think we're learning a lot by groups like Amazon. Amazon already has stores in New York where you're able to go in, grab something off the shelf, and walk out without having to physically go through a cashier. So we can apply that same thought process to the concessionaire process in airports. We all know who everyone is. If we tie ourselves back to a token or some sort of a Bluetooth enabled device, then maybe we don't have to actually swap credit cards with people, and so I think that there's lots of things that we can learn from other sectors, and the one thing I know about the airport community is they've always been first to respond to anything that can increase the passenger experience. So I have no doubt that, and that's why we call the effort Airports Adapt, because it's almost a call to arms for airports. We will respond to this, and we will make this a better environment so that you can travel without fear of disease or any kind of sickness.
Sure. Well, tell me a little bit about what that means for wellness. What when you're thinking about the wellness of the passengers as they transition through an airport, what is the impact of COVID had on that?
Sure. So when it comes to wellness, I think that this is a trend that we've already seen in architecture in general. First, we had the LEED standards that came out, and that was more based off sustainability and when it comes to the environment. But then the WELL standard comes out, and it talks about how we can design buildings for the wellness of the people that use them. So when it comes to wellness in airports, it's about first applying those standards to an airport facility. What can we do to design an airport that results in a healthy built environment for the passengers? And then second, wellness is about taking it to the next level when it comes to high risk events. So imagine during seasonal flu, is there a certain protocol that we need to put in place, such as rolling out more sanitation stations that have hand sanitizer and disinfectant wipes available, so that you can wipe down things in hold room if you want to sit down. Do we need to look at increased air filtration to remove particulates in the air, particularly in high risk areas such as queues and hold rooms? It's looking at those kind of things that can increase the health and safety of our passengers traveling through.
Well, certainly there's a lot of differences between, a crisis like the COVID pandemic and something like 9/11. But in terms of aviation, there's also a lot of similarities. How do you think this compares?
Yeah, I think that the paradigm shift that we're going to see after COVID will be as significant, if not more significant, than what we saw after 9/11. Primarily because 9/11 was a centralized event, that focused on one particular activity, whereas COVID is worldwide. It's across the board, every region, every location. So the shift is going to be huge. But I'm reminded of my grandma actually after 9/11. She didn't travel at all after that because there was too much anxiety for her, and she was just too worried about the process. And so I think one of our inherent goals with Airports Adapt is to address the passenger anxiety issues and to reassure passengers that the environment that we've created for them in these terminals is one that they know they can travel in safety. It's not only about doing the right thing, but it's about raising the awareness to the group that it is okay to travel again, and you don't have to be concerned about your airport being the incubator for illness.
So as the airports adapt to, the COVID situation, is it something that's being kind of rolled out now and is something that is having an immediate effect, or is it more of something that's going to have an effect post-COVID?
I think we have to look at it through both lenses. So, first we have to address the issue right now. What are the issues that we need to fix so that the public can be reassured to travel again? But then number two, this is going to give us the opportunity to, I think, rethink the whole paradigm of how we design. Is there things that we can do better, or is there things that have been promised to us via technology that we need to capitalize on now? A great example is biometrics. We've heard about biometrics for a while now, and it's slowly being rolled out. And now's the time to kind of demand it and say, hey, we need this to help make the process more fluid. We've also looked at things like self-service bag drop kiosks, and there's been some hesitation to implement that on a grand scale. But if it gives passengers control of their journey, then it's now time to implement it. So first we look at the short term. We identify what we need to fix right now. Where are the leaks in the boat? And then second, we look at how we can look at it, the whole thing as a new terminal design paradigm.
As the COVID pandemic kind of unfolded, it was definitely portrayed that the aviation industry and airports in particular were these places of hotbeds. They were kind of spreading the disease, and it really seems like now with this adaptation of design for airports, they're trying to be part of the solution moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're right. I think first off, airports have always tried to be a part of the solution. It's amazing how fast they can see something that's a problem and they go, we need to fix this right now.
It's sometimes weird to talk about the pandemic from almost a third person point of view as if it isn't affecting us. I mean, it's the reason we're doing the podcast in my kitchen. How have you been dealing with it?
Sure. I think for me personally, it's been quite an interesting journey. A family member of mine was actually diagnosed with COVID early on here in Dallas, right as the pandemic hit us. And it really shook our whole family because we were all counting back the days of when we actually last interacted with him. My son, when was the last time he interacted with his cousins, so that is he going to be okay? How long do we need to watch him? And so when the CDC came out with all these recommendations for how you do quarantining and how you do social distancing, we took those to heart really quickly. And so the application of those guidelines and the thought process of how those guidelines are going to influence us as a society moving forward really hit home to me. And so I think that the Airports Adapt initiative is going to be important because a lot of people connected airports to the passing of this disease, that somebody would come in from somewhere else, and the next thing and then should we have travel bans? Should we all not? And so it's important for airports to be on the forefront and to take a stand that the facilities that they're designing, the way that we're going through the process, and the way that we're able to adapt our infrastructure in response to this are all things that they're going to need to do to ensure that people can travel again, and to give the passenger population reassurance that the airports are a safe place to be.
Well, I really appreciate you joining us, kind of filling us in on some of what's happening with Airports Adapt, and I love to travel. I'm excited to be able to get back out there. It's encouraging to hear that it's something that is, airports are taking very intentionally to be a safer place to fly. So the best to you and your family. It sounds like your brother-in-law's doing better.
My brother-in-law is doing okay. He has tested negative twice, and so he's out of quarantine.
That's good to hear. Thank you for joining us, Scott, and thank you for joining us on TheSquare. If you didn't get the opportunity to watch the video portion of this episode, we did have some different images and graphics, so please feel free to check it out, and we'll see you next time.